Welcome to Ink and Bonez. My name is Jaden. In this video, we are finally tackling the inks from my creator-owned comic book, The Spooky Adventures of Patti and Jack. In the previous videos, I went through all the pencils, the sketches, and now we are finally here to start laying down the permanent black lines. Not much else to say, let's just go ahead and get right into the inks. So starting off, my main focus, especially when it comes to inking, is my line density, how the lines look. You don't want stagnant looking lines where everything is the same width going throughout the whole thing. It doesn't really showcase where the shadows are, where the lights are. So when I'm doing these candies in the foreground, I noticed that I wasn't really thinking about that, so I went ahead and just redid it, and I thought that the colors actually might make this look a little cleaner. So instead of completely blacking out the candy that's in the most immediate foreground, kind of want to see if I can get that effect when I tackle the colors. Because usually when something is very close to the foreground, usually it's the darkest object. It kind of creates a frame for the composition. In regards to the inks, the darkest thing is going to be the thing that I color in completely black. So that was my initial plan. But once doing the colors, I realized actually I could do like a cool little gradient. And my main focus, like I said, is just really drawing a lot of variations with the line weights. As you can see, Jack's hand is placed on top of a candy. The lines of his hand that are on top of the candy, naturally where shadows would occur, is where I put the thicker lines. And the top of his stem, those lines are a little bit more fine. And if I really wanted to be dramatic with the lighting, or maybe I was showing the lighting, the things that were the closest to it, they almost wouldn't even have a complete line. So it's kind of fun to play with the whole where you can add lines, where you add thicker lines, and where you don't even need to add lines at all. And from going to penciling these 22 plus edits of pages, penciling is my forte, that is my main thing. Going to the inks was definitely a little tricky. It took a very long time to get that flow of, you press hard and go light, or you press light and then go hard when you're doing your strokes. It's definitely a learning curve, and I'm just thankful that I am doing this whole project digitally, because there is no way in hell that I would be able to do this traditionally. It would take, I don't even know how long for me to produce a line as clean as this. I have some brush pens, I have the tools for it, but I definitely have not practiced that specific craft. And a lot of just talking about the process of the inks here, because pretty much there isn't really anything crazy happening. I'm just going through and making sure that just with the lines alone, no, sketching in shadows or, shading essentially, just with the lines alone, can you tell where the darker lines are, or the darker part of the composition is, and the lighter part of the composition. That's really all I'm focused on. Not being too heavy when I fill in my blacks, because I don't want that to take away from the overall piece. Like Timmy's eye holes, for example, or his collar. Inside of there, not a lot of light's gonna be reaching there. I think it makes sense to kind of fill that in with the black. And then as you can see, I'm kind of just going in and just filling out little spots of heavy black, heavy shadow, where a lot of candy is laying on top of each other. Just trying to make this whole thing, just trying to make it flow. If we were to look at the pencils, the parts where there's shadow on this, I scribbled in a little bit of shadow. It doesn't take away from the overall piece, if that kind of makes sense. It definitely adds to it. Pencils have to be very exact, but you can be a little sloppy, and it's easier to maneuver around the pencils. But then when you get to something that is very precise, like the inks, where those lines usually are permanent, you can't really do a lot of freeballing and, just doing some cross-hatching, or here's some stippling over here. If you do one thing that doesn't look cohesive to the rest of the image, it will really stick out when it comes to the inks. And I gotta tell you, when I first started drawing this book, candy was a real pain in the ass to draw. I didn't know what candy shapes I wanted to use. What does candy even look like when it's piled up in a bucket or a bag or whatever? By this point, I was fucking flying through. I knew exactly what shapes needed to be where. Let's get a sucker stick, sticking out this way, and okay, we're gonna do chocolate bars here. This might be a Reese's Pieces. You know, by the end, I was definitely well versed in the shape of a candy bar, and just adding in some more heavy shadows, making sure my lights are where they're supposed to be, my darks are where they're supposed to be, doing a little bit of details, a little bit of cross hatching. I don't want to oversaturate the image with detail, little tick marks and stuff like that, because that's not the type of book this is. This isn't a very detailed comic book. It's almost a slightly more detailed Calvin and Hobbes, kinda. Just the thick black lines, very simple color scheme, and just a fun little comic book. And there you have it, folks. I mean, there's not much to it. It's just the inks. I don't really have too much crazy stuff to say, especially for this image. It's just one giant hero image. I kind of had the same thing when I was talking about the pencils for this page. There's not a lot going on. It's just 3 characters chilling in a big old batch of candy. Now, when we get to the colors, good lord, I went back and forth back, left, right, X, circle, triangle. I was doing Mortal Kombat cheat codes to try and figure out how in the fuck am I gonna color this thing, but I figured it out. The cover is actually completely colored by now, and I'm very excited to show you that, because I'm not a colorist, but anytime I do get a chance to color and it looks somewhat like what was in my head, it is I'm very stoked, because at this point, looking at these inks, just the black and white inks, not my favorite. It looks a little muddy, if I could be honest, on the page, and I did my best with the lines and, you know, really trying to make that image look good. But, you know, what are you gonna do? That is the inks. Look them over in their glory. And that is going to do it for this episode of Ink and Bones. Thank you so much for watching. If you dug the video and you want to see some more, consider subscribing, slash that like button, comment down below. And that has been another episode of Ink and Bones, and I will see you on the next page.